I swear I have lost brain cells reading this. I've also come close to yelling at my stepmother when she brought it up. Seriously, this is Candace Owens level moon landing denial stupid. Yeah, she denied moon landing. Don't listen to her for her politics. No one who denies the moon landing is worth listening to. So what conspiracy theory is it that has made me consider whether or not to pop down to the local church and ask the priest whether or not it's acceptable to ask the big man in the sky whether or not we can have another flood, or better yet a fire? Well, I'm glad you asked. Is the conspiracy theory that the Titanic was swapped with the Olympic and that the Olympic was sunk in a scheme of grand tax fraud? Yeah, it's moronic, but so many people actually believe it. I'm not even kidding. Look it up online. There are so many people who believe this. And this video won't be too long, but good grief, I'm going to say something about it. And also watch my recent East India Company video. It's large and not getting as much love as it should, so enjoy it, like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. And I'm selling t-shirts too if you want one. I'll link it in the bio. So, the gist of this conspiracy surrounding the fate of Titanic's older sister is that following the collision of RMS Olympic in September 1911 with the cruiser HMS Hawke, the ship was in a bad way, and because White Star Line was found to be at fault for the collision and had to pay for it, arguably they weren't, but I digress, the company was therefore poor, and the Olympic was so damaged it couldn't be repaired properly. Therefore, in order to recoup losses, the Olympic went to the dockyard for repairs next to her sister that was fitting out, the RMS Titanic, and some enterprising individual decided to swap the names over and sink the Titanic on purpose, which was actually now the Olympic, and claim the insurance money. Sounds a bit far-fetched, right? Well, because it is. It's fucking dumb. And I can't stress this enough, if you actually believe this, after this video particularly, don't procreate. The world will be better for it. Let's start with some basic reasons on why this is dumb. Firstly, the ships weren't identical, they actually looked different. This picture here shows it pretty clear. Looking at the promenade decks, you can see the difference. The Titanic featured a multiple uber-rich ritzy first-class suite thing, with private promenades on the promenade decks that were enclosed. The Titanic also had an enclosed promenade towards the bow for better weather keeping for passengers on the promenade. Olympic was completely open. Funnily enough, those private promenades are actually shown quite accurately in the movie. If you want to see it in colour, what they actually looked like, they did a really good job of actually making them look like they actually did. But these private areas are very, very, very obviously visual on the Titanic, and on the wreck at the bottom of the ocean. It's not very hard to see. I would also like to draw your attention to the bridge wings. On Titanic, they hang over the side just a little to help with navigation. On Olympic, they do not. A common thing thrown to dispute this is the fact that newspaper reports show Titanic looking identical to Olympic, disregarding all the things I've just told you. And yeah, there's a reason for that. Journalists don't give a shit what ships look like. Case in point here. They reused photos of the Olympic to report on the Titanic, because they were too lazy to go and get a photo, and they went, oh, it kinda looks the same, it's got 4 funnels, I guess we'll use it. It is quite well documented that they did this. Also, it's journalists. They've never exactly been known for complete honesty, but again, I digress. Titanic's name was also applied to its hull in a really annoying way if you wanted to commit some insurance fraud. The name itself wasn't bolted onto the ship, rather the outline was etched onto the hull plates in letters that were 45 centimeters or about 18 inches tall, and then the inside was painted with that yellowy gold colour that White Star Line was famous for. You can also, again, see this on the bloody shipwreck. Still not enough? Don't worry, I got more. The ships themselves were built right next to each other, literally side by side, Olympic and Titanic. You can see some awesome photos of it happening, and Olympic's hull was painted white because it looked better in the cameras, and thankfully they painted it black afterwards. I've never been a fan of the white hull. Never been a fan. They did it to Mauritania after the war, didn't look great. But they were given the names Olympic and Titanic quite a long ways into the build. For most of the build, they were simply just titled hull numbers 400 and 401. The major machinery in the ships was simply stamped 400 and 401 to reflect this. Oh no, look! What's that number on the propeller at the bottom of the ocean and on some of the heavy machinery still to this day? Some of you still aren't convinced, aren't you? There's going to be one person who's not convinced, and I'm starting to worry about your brain cells if you still think this is a big scam. Well, here is something to take note of. If Olympic's collision had sent the White Star Line into the red, why did they immediately start building a ship bigger than Titanic the moment Titanic was launched? Yeah, you're just going to forget about the RMS Britannic? Yeah, there isn't much logic to them doing that if they're poor, is there? Also, not to mention the sheer cost in refitting Olympic after Titanic sank. It cost a fortune. They basically built an entire new ship on another ship when they did that. They added false hulls. They added more watertight doors. They spent a fortune refitting Olympic after Titanic sank. Well, they had to take her out of service for months to make the change, and that was expensive as hell. Oh, and the insurance payout claim is stupid too. The ship was worth about 7.5 million US dollars. And it was insured, and the payout that they got for the insurance was about 5 million US dollars. And then they had to compensate the survivors, and then the, 1,000 or so people who died's families who made claims. Like, they were hurting for money by doing this. They didn't gain anything by Titanic sinking, so, worst insurance fraud I've ever seen. Like, right up to the Great Depression, the White Star Line was intending to build a literal supersized ocean liner called the RMS Oceanic. Like, it's really dumb if you believe this conspiracy. Like, it's exceedingly dumb. But the biggest factor, and this is honestly where most conspiracy theories die, is how do you keep that many people quiet? This is the same argument that can be made with the moon landing and people who deny it. The amount of dry dock workers and the amount of artisans and craftsmen and crewmen and people who were had to be involved in completely rebuilding the Olympic to look like the Titanic externally, and then to install new cabins, swap the propellers and the heavy machinery over. Have you ever tried to change a ship's engine? You basically have to rip the thing apart to put the new engine in. It's not an easy step thing to do. Like when they refitted Olympic after Titanic sank, they had to take some of the funnels off at one point. And then on top of that, they had to change the hull paneling. They had to move windows and portholes around because, they were in different places on either ship too. They may have been sister ships, but they were different. The amount of work would have been immense. And honestly, how do you keep that many people quiet? People don't shut up about things like this. It would have been essentially impossible, say for shooting every single dockyard worker to keep this quiet. It's just not feasible. I mean, I suppose that leads into the conspiracy theory about Australia not being real. Maybe they all got sent here. Who knows? It could be a big setup. Maybe I'm part of the con. Defending a 100-year-old ocean liner wreck. People will believe that. People will actually think that. In short, the ship on the bottom of the ocean, it's the RMS Titanic. It's not the RMS Olympic. Olympic is an amazing ship. Really, honestly, have a look at her history. She's amazing. I'll probably do a video on her one day. She transported thousands of men to Europe during World War I. She sank a submarine by ramming it. Can you imagine that? Being rammed and sunk by an ocean liner? She survived a torpedo slamming into her side, which fortunately was a dud. They only found out that it actually was a torpedo that hit her. It was a dud, so obviously it wasn't a huge boom. When they discovered a kraken at the side of her hull after the war when they were fixing her up for civilian service again. However, personally, I think the sheer anger of Olympic at the loss of her second sister, HMAS, previously RMS Britannic, as a hospital ship earlier in the war to a mine, scared the torpedo into not exploding. Wartime paint though, look how amazing she looked. Olympic would go on to become one of the most beloved ocean liners of the 1920s, being a personal favourite of people of the kind of like Charlie Chaplin and other famous movie stars. She was really the movie star liner. Unfortunately, she would later be scrapped during the Great Depression, and she wouldn't survive into seeing the Second World War, but really, I'm getting off topic. So yeah, stupidest online conspiracy ever. Like, it's so mind-bogglingly dumb that if you believe it, you need help. Genuinely need help. Might talk about another conspiracy theory later on, but we'll get to that. But I'm going to go and watch Napoleon this weekend and probably lose further brain cells, so maybe I'll talk about that too, we'll never know. Like, comment, subscribe, like I said.